So hello everyone, happy New Year. This is the SIG cluster Lifecycle, the cluster API office hour meetings, and this meeting we are using an etiquette, so you have to use the raise hand feature of Zoom if you want to speak, and we are also following the CNCF code of conduct, so please be nice with each other. And we have a meeting agenda, which I'm sharing. Let me paste the link in the Zoom chat. If you don't have access to this document, you have to subscribe to the SIG cluster Lifecycle meeting mailing list. And let's get started with today's agenda. Vince joined the meeting. It seems not. So I have a couple of PSA to get started. So first of all, we are seeing a set of CI flakes. Thanks, Stefan, for fixing some of them. The remaining one are due to a test infra machine, which is not working well. And we raised the problem to on-call people from test infra, and we are hopefully when they fix the machine in CI, everything will get back to normal. But if you have basically the problem is if your job gets scheduled on the CI on the machine that is having problem, your job will fail. So you can do retest basically, and there is a chance that the job gets scheduled in another machine. Question, Stefan, do you want to add something?
I think you captured everything. It's just that one individual node is broken. For some reason, our jobs are scheduled with a high probability on that node. And if we hit that, we get errors. And if not, everything's fine. So just retest. And if it fails a few times in a row, retest it a few hours later.
Okay, thank you. Next PSA, we are moving the code under /controller to internal. This is part of an effort that we agreed last year, and a bunch of PR related to this effort already merged, moving under internal all the experimental controllers, CapD, and CapBK. Now we are moving the CapiCore controller under internal. We are trying to make this fast, as fast as possible in order to not cause too much annoyance to the open PRs, and this is a good period to do these changes. Question, comment? Okay, last PSA from me. Last year, in October, if I remember well, Robert von Orren from VMware proposed the idea to start an effort to have a cluster API characters to join Fifi and family in the CNCF. And if we want to make this happen, and to make this happen before KubeCon EU, that is May this year, we have basically to get things started, and what we need is a community approval on 3 things. The first one is the name. Last year we kind of agreed on Little Turtle as a name. The look of this mascot, which is, and we kind of agreed that this to be similar to the Capi logo with the turtles or the CNCF plushie, which are the 3 turtles. And the last point is how much to give visibility. And for this point, I think the answer is kind of given. As much as possible visibility on all the media. So iterating with the community, is there someone that sees some blocker or has different idea on this proposal, or should we green light Robert to move it forward with CNCF with this effort? Go, Cecile.
Just a question, was there some kind of document or something, some place for like name ideas that was going around?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But may I ask, because do you want to make a pool on the names, something similar?
No, I was just curious because I didn't remember like the name alternatives.
No, there was not such a document. If we want to do this, and I asked you to give your opinion, we need to get this done kind of quickly. So personally, I'm fine with the proposed name, and I'm fine with green lighting, but let's see if everyone agrees or not. So I don't see comments in chat or stuff like that. So how should we proceed? Option A, we green light now. Option B, we give a short, lazy consensus time. The scene.
Do we have a deadline by which we should submit the name?
Not that I'm aware of, but the Amanda and Robert that pinged me are saying that the sooner the better in order to reach the deadline, because they are not really aware of the timing of the CNCF for all the artwork that needs to be done.
Okay.
Okay, so it is my proposal. Let's give a deadline, a short deadline, till this the end of this weekend, and if no objection arise in the channel, or we can green light the effort. Cecile?
Yeah, maybe we can just post in Slack and get some reactions and other proposals there.
Okay, I will post in Slack and wait for the end of the week. Thank you, everyone. And next one is up to you.
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry, so I just wanted to see if anyone had any ideas. I see Stefan already commented, actually. So in CabZ, we're trying to support Azure, cluster class. In order to do that, we need to add Azure cluster templates. But it turns out Azure cluster templates can't share the exact same template spec than Azure clusters, because Azure clusters have some spec fields that are per cluster specific. For example, there's a resource group name, which is an Azure thing where it's your cluster lives in a resource group and it has to be different per cluster. So because we can't share the whole spec, we had two options, which is either to duplicate the fields and have two different CRDs, but then that would cause issues where we have duplicate code and we might diverge or forget to change things in both places, like it's not great. So we decided we wanted to refactor Azure Cluster to extract the fields that are common to multiple clusters and can be shared, and then only add on top the ones that are specific to the cluster. But in order to do that, we're trying to see if there's any other pattern that exists out there in the CRD world for like sharing common types or shared types between CRDs. And we haven't really found anything so far. So right now we're going with like naming it with the suffix common, but I don't know if that's the best way to handle this. And I was wondering if anyone had any suggestions or any ideas about this.
Yassine and then Dane.
Yeah, so we have an example for this in CapV, if I recall correctly. We have the virtual machine clone spec that is pretty much shared between vSphere machine and the CRD that represents a VM in vSphere. So you can take a look at their, yeah, aside of that, there aren't much aware like of these cases in the ecosystem, unfortunately.
I was going to say we run into this a lot internally because we write small automation controllers and webhooks for controllers for CRDs from many different projects. I agree this has been a large pain point. We've used different combinations. Sometimes we'll use unstructured because we know the subset of fields that we need to inspect, and we just kind of rely on API stability to not have to change those very often. In other cases, we've copied entire type definitions into packages within the projects themselves to avoid creating inter-controller dependencies, which has been really awful. I've thought for a long time it really, I think, makes sense to have the types and the clients broken out into some kind of separate package so that these things can be imported by many things, but it's definitely not been the trend.
Stefan and then Vince.
Just want to say what I wrote there. So we had a similar case, but I guess kind of the reverse when we talked about cluster class. So we discussed struct names there, and we should, so those are just specific to cluster class, and we just didn't want to name them without any kind of prefix, because then you don't know to which API they belong. And we essentially just picked names which make sense without any kind of hard pattern with prefix or suffix or anything. We also looked at the core community types, and the only thing I could find there is that when they have some specific structs which are really specific to some resources, then they have something like an endpoint prefix or something, so endpoint port and not just port. And I guess if they would have a port which is general applicable to multiple resources, they would just call it port without any kind of prefix or suffix. But that's just one data point. I'm not aware of any rules there.
Vince?
Oh, sorry I was late. Happy New Year. Just catching up on this discussion, like for the length issue, there was a common field or like suffix or prefix. I would drop it. Honestly, like just looking at the closest example of with embedding types would be the Cube Builder declarative pattern. I don't know if there is like any new updates on here, but pretty much like what they wanted to do, and I think like has been still for a while, this repo, but what they wanted to do is like to embed like some version types into structs, and then so that like you always know like what fields will be there. Because if you just inline those fields, then you can just unmarshal it with JSON, without doing any further mucking with the types. This is something like we probably could take like for our patterns of like, instead of using unstructured, we could just use one of these structs. So like by contract, you have to embed instead of having fields necessarily, but that's like still an API change. To your question though, Cecile, like I would say, like if you do have a type that have to be shared, just put it in version, but without any prefix or suffix. Just make it explicit what it is. That's at least like what I've done in the past.
Sorry, I don't think I caught what you're saying. So you're saying, so what we're doing right now is we're embedding a struct that has like the shared types in both places. So you're saying to do that, but then how do you name the struct itself?
But what I'm saying is like, it doesn't matter. Like you could just like take like the cube builder pattern approach, or you could call it meta, or you could just call it like network.
Okay.
It's like that's also
Got
like
it.
another thing.
Okay. Yeah, in most places it doesn't matter because we're just using the fields directly, but it does matter in some cases where like you're building the struct from like for tests and things like that. So
yeah, so the closest thing that I found, like you build the declarative patterns, like has it as common, and you have common spec, common status.
okay, that's what we're doing. Yeah, but we put it as a suffix. Okay. Well, do you have a reference to the cube builder
Yeah, I put it in chat. If you go to this file, for example, you can see there's a prefix that says common spec, common status. We could follow something similar, or just not.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks all for the input.
Yeah, thanks, Cecile, for raising. I think that if we, even if it is not a strong recommendation, as I understood, it will be nice to document how we are solving this problem in our API guidelines as a suggested or reference implementation, and it will be nice. So, okay, if there are no more comments on this topic, we can move to. Let me just check the. In the chat there are some links, but I see that the Cecile is copying on the notes. Thank you, Cecile. So let's move to the next one. Christian.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just wanted to spread the word. Just before the holidays, we published a small app called Cluster API State Metrics. It's an example how the metrics for Cluster API objects could look like. I just wanted to ask if there's some interest in having a short demo of that in one of the next meetings, or yeah. Also, the target of us, or for us, is to get progress on the linked issue, the metrics issue at the Cluster API project. Yeah. So I think that's it.
Thank you. Personally, I'm definitely +1. I don't know if you are aware, recently we merged something in Cluster API, at least for having Prometheus, Grafana in easy setup in our test environment with Tilt. And it would be great if sooner or later we can get also some default stats with metrics, the default dashboard with metrics, stuff like that, and to reason about. So I'm definitely interested in this area and to see a demo. I don't know if there are others have opinions.
Yeah, I think there already had been some +1, so I will look forward to prepare something for maybe the next meeting next week. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Christian. So there are no more topics in agenda. Beans, Cecile, do you want to take the opportunity to discuss something about a roadmap, or let's postpone this to next week, where maybe there will be more people around?
From my side, like I think the only thing I wanted to say is like Happy New Year, everybody, and it seems like we have like a lot of stuff to do this year. So it's really great to be part of this group as always. I'm really excited for to just prepare the roadmap. I think like we have the GitHub issues opened, and if we do have like we want to check those boxes like and start to work on some of those, we should probably put them like finalize it a little bit more. And also like I think we're wrapping up the 1.1 release as well this month.
Thank you. Dane?
Yes, I didn't get time to add it to the agenda, but I have a pull request open to add the externally managed replica count to the experimental machine pool type. And I just kind of wanted to raise that, kind of give it a little bump in the meeting here and see if there were any impediments to that getting into 1.1.
I personally have to review or to catch up with this work. So if you can put the link in the meeting agenda, I will do my best to review it by the end of the week. I don't know if some other reviewers had chance to review it recently. Vince? I
have like if I understand correctly, this is a field that it's not necessarily using within Cluster API, but it's used to inform other things outside, right? I guess like actually like I'll probably defer to Cecile because you probably know more about machine pool in general. It does feel weird, but you know. So what do you think?
I agree. Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Oh, I said I think David and Matt had been commenting on the PR and had a back and forth discussion, so they're probably better placed than I am to answer.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I made some comments on the PR, but I think that speaks for itself, I guess.
Vince, do you still have the resended?
Yeah, we can just look on the PR. I personally like it. Just find it a little bit weird that we're saying there's a replicas field and then there's like this other field that like says like it's externally managed. And I guess like if this is a temporary thing, like I would actually maybe say let's just do, I don't know, maybe an annotation or something, or just understand like what is the use case a little more. I can take a look at the PR with the last comments as well.
I agree. It's definitely different, and I mean, it could probably go on the infrastructure provider resources instead. But I think that may cause some confusion, right? Because if you're making the infrastructure manage the replicas from there, and someone decides to kubectl scale a machine pool, for instance, that's going to be overwritten by the infrastructure provider, which is going to definitely be awkward. And anyway, I saw David raised his hand. I'll let David talk.
So I was concerned about it being temporary as well. And it also jumps out, you know, not having any kind of behavior in the controller itself. So those two things kind of led me down the same path as what Vincent said with, you know, an attribute seems like a reasonable thing. I'm just curious, why not an attribute there as opposed to, you know, a field?
Yeah, I mean, it could probably, you mean an annotation, I assume?
I'm sorry, I've been spending too much time in OpenTelemetry. An annotation.
It could be. I don't think it's going to be a temporary field. You know, when I look at things like what we've started to kind of look at with a little bit of spot inst and some other things. There's certain use cases where the replicas count will never be managed there. So there's been a few others from the community too that are in that boat. It's also the current operating state of most production Kubernetes clusters today. And maybe eventually that changes, but I don't know if I foresee a world in which all cluster API clusters will always want to be managed, have their replica count managed via that path, right? And that's why I think a field does make sense, because I think it would be long-lived and potentially forever.
The weird thing about this field though is like it's not really doing anything, right? Like it's just informing the user, or like is the user informing itself? Would it be better to just not have the replica's number set? I mean, even if you do scale, so like actually let me back up a little. Like it just feels like this should be a status field. So like the system should inform this thing, like this pool is managed externally, and then inform cluster API that's like this is something that's like externally managed, and potentially block any scale resources as well, rather than like something that's in spec, which you could always change from true to false, or whatever else. You could still change the replica as well. So that's why it like kind of creates confusion, is that we're not really blocking anything with this field.
We could maybe the thing is, something needs to configure, something needs to signal to the infrastructure which mode it's in, right? Am I reading this replicas count, or am I writing to it? What's my source? What's my destination? This is essentially reversing the reconciliation flow of replicas in the infrastructure provider.
In that case, I would probably, sorry, HCC, actually go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks. I was just going to say, I think the other issue with this is that there is also no way to know if the infrastructure provider that's backing it will actually support this field or do anything with it. So it could lead to a bad UX where you're setting it like expecting something to happen, but it's being totally ignored and nothing's happening. So I think, like, to go back to what Vince is saying, I think functionally it makes sense, but I think the UX is weird, like by having it in this place right now, because it's not being acted upon. So I don't know what Vince was going to say. Maybe it's related to that, but yeah.
Yeah, I just actually adds to what I was about to say, which is like, it does feel that something like a very specific to the infrastructure provider. So if there is a way for that controller to understand that it's externally managed. So you mentioned like it should update the other replica field. Maybe there is a contract here that like we could write where like we have a status field that informs the machine pool controller that says, I'm externally managed, and this is my current replica count that I see. And then the machine pool controller will see those fields, update itself, and also like kind of maybe, I guess you cannot reject updates, or just make it nil and say like, this is managed externally. I don't have, you cannot set the spec, but you can set it maybe in status. So maybe we have a replicas number also in status field of machine pool instead, which just informs the users like this is the current number. This is just all suppositions, right? Like probably need to discuss in an issue.
That makes sense. Like that was basically the big trade-off in my mind, was where to put this, where to actually put the configuration. Does it, and we can easily put this in the infrastructure provider instead and have it push the other direction.
Yeah, I would be probably more in favor of that. It just seems like a cleaner. And then if we do find like enough kind of commonality, we can write a contract that like brings it back.
The other thing to think about maybe is there ever going to be other types of things that we want to delegate management of for machine pools, right? Because that was one of the constructs at the beginning, is with machine pools, you can delegate some stuff to the cloud providers in some cases. So I don't know if like it would be worth thinking about that, is like is there a way that field could become more generic, or like, is there something else that might, you know, be worth being externally managed other than replicas, maybe like OS images and things like that? Just something to think about.
Yeah, there are things like, especially as we start looking to, for instance, machine pool machines, there's already logic in Kappa when a change needs to roll the machines to use Amazon's instance refresh, which that means the actual rollout mechanism is delegated to the cloud provider. So yes, there are definitely mechanisms that are in other areas that we would want to delegate externally. So yeah, that's a good point. Regarding machine pool replicas to nil, I think the problem we ran into there is I think that would be a pretty breaking change. There's several places that end up defaulting it to 1 if you set it to nil, or check if it's nil and then treat it as 1. It's kind of interesting. So I mean, we could probably clean that up, but that might have some odd implications. I recall trying to do this once before. But that's okay. I think this has been a really good discussion. I think we can continue it in the thread, and I can take an attempt at yeah, true. At kind of revisiting both the replicas nil thing and the
if I may add a comment, is that the other construct like machine deployment are using a machine replica count equal nil to signal this is managed by something else. So if we, I know that they are different, but from a user point of view, it will be really nice if we have the same pattern for declare externally managed.
I was not aware of that. That's very good to know. I'll revisit what I ran into, because that was actually my first attempt, and I think it was just simply that I had a lot of places in the code I needed to touch, but that's probably okay if it makes it consistent. I'll revisit that. Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone for discussion at this point. Some last second topic. Going once, 2, 3 times. Again, Happy New Year and see you next week.